Hey everyone, and welcome to Season 10 of the Choose UCalgary Podcast. I'm Prithul, your host this season, a third-year student in the Haskell School of Business, and a new co-op student with the undergraduate recruitment team. If you're thinking about joining UCalgary, you're in the right place. Each episode will dive into student life at UCalgary, chat with current students, and explore everything from faculties to campus resources. It's all about giving you a real feel for the UCalgary experience. Let's get started. I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the traditional territories of the peoples of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta, and acknowledge that the city of Calgary is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Districts 5 and 6. As someone who moved to Calgary from abroad, I've developed a deep sense of gratitude for the opportunity to live, study, and connect with new friends and colleagues on the lands of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and the Stoney Nakoda Nations. It's important to remember that everything we do here at the University of Calgary, including podcast recordings, starts with these lands. Please keep this in mind as you listen to this podcast. Welcome back, future students. We are joined today by Michelle Murphy, the Manager for Transfer and International Applicants here at the University of Calgary. In this episode, we'll be diving into what the application and admission processes look like for our students from the United States or students from other places in the world who are also following a United States curriculum. So welcome to the podcast, Michelle.
Thank you so much for having me, Berkel.
How is the admission season going for you so far?
Oh, it's starting. It's in full force. So we're busy, getting busier.
Yeah, we're in December now, and this episode will be out in January, so I'm guessing now is probably one of the most busy times for you.
Yeah, I'd say between January and March, we're busy people in admissions.
Yeah, I'd assume so. So I'm here to ask you a few questions that a lot of our US applicants or students who are following US curriculums in different places might be wondering about UCalgary. So we'll just dive into those if you're ready.
I'm ready.
Think the first and most pressing question is, for US listeners who might be new to the Canadian university circuit, could you give us a quick snapshot of what makes UCalgary admissions process unique?
Yeah, so rather than using a common app like many US universities, University of Calgary has its own online application system. So students will create an account, they'll choose their programs, and they'll upload all of their documents through that one system. I think another difference is timing. So many schools in the US have these fixed timelines for dates when offers are released, but we operate on a rolling admission basis, which means that the earlier you apply, the more likely you are to get a decision earlier. Finally, I'd say we don't consider SAT or ACT scores. We have some programs that have supplemental requirements like an audition for music, but most of our programs, it's really just based off grades and courses that are prerequisites, and that's what carries the most weight in the application process.
Yeah, so some slight differences there, but all very manageable, I would say.
Yeah.
For every applicant. I myself quite enjoyed applying to UCalgary. It was so easy for me, just uploading the transcripts and all.
Yeah, great to hear.
Kind of in that same vein, when you do get questions from US applicants, do you see maybe there's some differences in like the expectations that they have or like the questions that they have as opposed to like Canadian students perhaps?
Yeah, I'd say some of the US questions that we get, mostly in Canadian systems, students will follow a sequence, right? They'll take, a grade 11 physics and then a grade 12 physics, and it follows a sequence. Whereas in the US, there's more flexibility in terms of when those courses are offered. So, they could start taking honors and AP courses sometimes as early as grade 9. So I think that's one of the questions we get a lot is, what do you consider? And for us, we'll really take a look at your honors and AP whenever they were completed. But for regular courses, we also look at a form of sequence in itself. So grade 11 and 12 is where we're looking for the prerequisite courses. And if they're in grade 10, we typically require alliance to make that decision. So I think that is a bit unique from our perspective, again, just due to differences between the Canadian curriculum and the US curriculum. But that's, I think, one of the biggest questions we get is, what are you looking at?
Well, that makes perfect sense. And it is true that for a lot of the Canadian universities, even when I was applying, and UCalgary specifically, it was mostly, for the admissions process at least, it was mostly academic. And then when I went into the scholarships applications that focus more on like extracurriculars, essays, all of those things that maybe aren't as required when we are just applying for admissions.
Totally. Like, I think they count in some capacity. But for admissions, we really look at, the grades and the courses you've completed, and all that extra, you're totally right, helps for other things like scholarships.
Also in that same vein, so there might be some slight differences in the documents that international students and domestic students have to upload when they're applying. So when it comes to students from the States or adjacent curriculums, what are some documents that they might have to submit?
Yeah, this is a great question because it is something that comes up frequently. So students, first and foremost, should always look at the to-do list that's in their student center. So once they apply, they get access to their student center, and it's kind of a personalized area that talks about your own application. I'm sure you remember it well, Rithel, but it has the things that you need to submit for your own application. So as I mentioned earlier, some programs have additional requirements, but the main thing we're looking for are high school transcripts. So because of that, uniqueness to the US with those courses being completed a little earlier than what we see in Canada, we'll look at courses completed in grade 10, grade 11, and grade 12. And if we do need to go for some honors in AP in grade 9, we'll do that as well. Then, after reviewing transcripts, we may request additional information such as course outlines. For example, if there's a mathematics course that was taken in grade 10 and we're unable to determine whether it's calculus or pre-calculus, we'll ask for additional documentation if it's required to move your file forward. So it's important to keep an eye on your to-do list because although, you may complete it at one point, something else might come up again after review. But we also tell students by email to say, hey, check your student center. There might be something else there. So best advice really is to submit everything early. It gives us a chance to review and then keep an eye on it for updates.
Well, I can certainly say I love my student center. It gives me every information that I've ever needed in my life. And so, yeah, I would highly recommend, even as a current student, to check your student center. Yeah, I think that makes it so much easier and more accessible for students. I understand while applying or even like going through the admissions process might be a bit confusing at times because it's like a newer system that you're getting used to. But the student center is a great resource, and the to-do list specifically, I quite enjoy.
Great.
And kind of moving on to some more adjacent questions. Once students have applied, when can they expect to hear back about their admissions decision?
So most high school offers of admission are granted after we receive first term grade 12 grades. So that's usually between mid-February and early April. So really, as soon as you submit your application for admission to the University of Calgary, you'll be able to log into that special student center, get to your portal, see what you have to submit in terms of your to-do. And then after you submit your documents, you can track the status of your application, which is helpful for students. I think it helps answer some questions to see just where we're at.
Yeah, definitely. Moving on to some more detailed questions. So I think this is also a question we get quite a bit, and I think you addressed it a bit, but if there was anything more to add, how does UCalgary evaluate US students' GPAs or transcripts or any of those documents? Is it different in any way from domestic applications?
Yes and no. I'd say no in terms of what we're looking for is really kind of that early evaluation and standard evaluation, which I should probably explain in the context of the podcast here. So early is primarily based off grade 11 grades, and then standard, we start to pull from the grade 12. So once your grade 12 marks start to come in, that's what we start to look at to calculate an average. So I guess to answer your question is it different from domestic students? No, in terms of what we're looking for, but yes, in terms of we look at it differently, looking at courses from grade 10, getting them assessed if we need to. That's not something we do for students domestically, just because we're familiar with the curriculum, we know what we're looking for, but there is a special attention that's paid to that. Certain, science courses follow, chemistry in grade 10, physics in grade 11, and bio in grade 12 sequence, which isn't something that we see in Canada. So yes, it is different, but that's how we would evaluate. Is essentially at first we'll look at those grade 11 grades. We'll make sure that the student has the courses required for admission as well. And then if they're not admissible based on that, we'll hold off until we get more information with the grade 12 marks. If we're able to, the student has everything in progress, we can say, okay, we just need to see what your grades are. If they change, we'll wait for that to come in. So it follows the same pattern, I'd say, and the same evaluation process for that reason. But yeah.
Absolutely. And I think from what I gathered from it is that on the student angle, it's maybe not as different. It's more of a logistical thing for the admissions team to go through. So
Yeah.
for a student, you just apply, you just upload your transcripts and you're good to go.
Yeah, totally. And if we need something, we'll let you know.
Yeah, on your to-do list.
Exactly. Check.
In your student center. So since you mentioned our grade 11 and 12 students, I do have another question for you. So for our future students who maybe are thinking a bit ahead and want to plan out their grade 11 and 12 courses accordingly, what are maybe some things that the admissions team might consider in terms of grade 11 and 12 courses?
Yeah. So first and foremost, we look for prerequisites. So prerequisites are courses that are required for your specific program. And let's say, you're going into engineering, we're going to require a course like physics, for example, and pre-calculus, for example. So there's certain courses that are required to be considered for a specific program. So those are the most important courses when we look at the admission decision. And all of the other courses kind of fit within that. So prerequisites, those are the main ones, but then there's also perhaps some approved courses or approved options. At the end of the day, we're really looking for 5 courses, including prerequisites. So as long as you have something that meets those requirements, that's how you should plan accordingly. And then once again, for AP and honors courses, those can be completed a little earlier, and we take them whenever they were completed.
Well, that makes perfect sense. Also, for our future listeners who might not be too well versed in university terminology, would you like to speak a bit more to what approved courses and approved options are?
So approved courses and options, they refer to specific high school courses that are recognized by us for admission purposes. So it's not every course that we will consider for admission. For example, if there's an adulting course in your high school, it's probably a really fun course to take, but it's not something that we'll consider for admission purposes.
Oh, that checks out. Also, if you have other questions about admissions and your specific requirements for whatever program you want to get into, you could always just look up admission requirements UCalgary. And one of the first pages that would show up is the admissions widget, where you can put the curriculum that you're in right now, and you'll get a set of courses that you might need for admissions. So that's always a cool tool to have.
Totally. The admissions widget is what we use all the time.
It is accurate. We, have all our programs listed. So let's say you're interested in business, you can see the drop down for all the courses for business. But then let's say you're also interested in science, then you can see the courses that are required for science too. So it's a really good tool.
You could also check somewhat of the estimates of what your grades might be, or what grades you might need, and you can also check which programs you might be more competitive for if you want to add multiple options. So it's just a good tool to have if you want to check out multiple options.
Totally. Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. When it comes to your documents, the more information you give us, the better. So if you have information, the course outlines that we talked about, a grading scale that would help us take decisions. Again, if we need information to move forward, we will ask for it. But the more you complete your documentation and having a transcript with a grading scale on it, that's always really helpful for our team.
Oh, that also makes a lot of sense. Now, moving on to there are a lot of students who take more advanced level courses to get a bit ahead in their degree. I know I got a lot of transfer credits from my GCEs, so I'm wondering if there are any AP or IB courses that might have a bit of an impact on transfer credits that students might be granted.
Yeah, definitely. Great question. So for AP, we require your College Board examinations And to be considered for transfer credit, we require a grade of 4 or higher for AP. Now, for IB, it's different. So we would look at your IB exams that you've completed, and that's after 2 years of IB. So you usually have IB1 and then IB2. So to be eligible, you need to have completed IB2 and the IB examinations. And there we require a score of 5 or higher to be considered for transfer credit. Now, if you have questions about transfer credit, our website, just by Googling transfer credit UCalgary and you click the link, you'll be able to actually sort by AP or IB, depending on what you're completing. And you'll be able to see the different courses that we would award for those scores.
Well, all the resources are just one Google away, which is so comforting.
That's the goal.
Want to live at the heart of campus life? UCalgary's Resident Services offers safe, vibrant first-year housing options with a community of peers and easy access to your classes, the library, and so much more. If you're applying from high school and under the age of 21, apply by May 1st and you're guaranteed a place in residence for your first year. Applications for residence open on November 1st for the fall or academic term. Want in? Don't wait. Secure your spot and live your best university life on campus. So, how does dual credit coursework factor into an application?
Yeah, so from the US, often you'll see students who are at a high school and then they complete courses, perhaps at a community college or a college, and they're usually listed as dual credit on their application. So for our eyes, you're still considered a high school student. You are in high school. But if we can award transfer credit for the courses completed at the post-secondary level, we will. But what's important to know for that is that you need to submit your transcript from the community college or college so that we have, your high school transcript as well as that other transcript in order for us to award that credit.
Yeah, that also makes so much sense. I think I know more about applying as a US student now, even though I'm not one. I think we've covered a lot of the more technical things. I do want to dive a bit more into what being an international student is like in Canada, or being from the States specifically, how that might look like. But before that, do you think there's any other technical pieces that we might be missing?
Yeah, I think one of the questions that we often get as well is a lot of students in the US not only hold US citizenship, they'll also have Canadian citizenship. So just on the application, it will ask you a question about your citizenship. So if you are a dual or if you are a Canadian living in the States, it's important that you select that you are Canadian for our intents and purposes when it comes to tuition and the deposit. That's worth mentioning. And if you are really a US resident, then you would select US and be considered as an international student. So there is that piece where we see more dual, I'd say, in the US, just due to proximity, than some of our other international areas.
Well, that makes... I need to come up with a new response. But that does make a lot of sense. I do have another... That led me to having another question. So I know students with international credentials have to pay an application fee of $145. And domestic students or students with domestic credentials have to pay a fee of $125. If a student is Canadian but has US curriculum credentials, which fee would they then have to pay?
Yeah, they would be paying a $145. There's more manual work involved. As I mentioned, we do have course assessments for these students. So that $145 falls within the curriculum itself and not citizenship.
Yeah, checks out.
That's a good one.
Thank you. Are there any other frequently asked questions that we get from our US applicants, and what might those answers be?
Yeah, I think the main questions we get is really, what are you looking for? When will I hear back? And really, I think those are the two. I think another kind of important one is, for sports scholarships. That's something that's quite big in the US. Yeah, you will have some full scholarships. It's not something that's offered at the University of Calgary and in Canada in general. There are caps to that. But I think that is one of the questions that we get is, how do I get a full ride? And I think that sports is something that is, very prominent when it comes to US universities. And we do get some sport-related questions. And, we do have our sport team, the Dinos, which we love. But sports look different at Canadian universities. I know there's full rides. You have the NCAA in the States. It's not a thing here, although our teams are very good and they play against each other, but the funding piece is different. There are some caps in Canada that limit that full ride scholarship. So I think that's one of the questions too is, I play a sport. Can I come play the sport? And you can, just it will look different.
Yeah. But the dinos are still really cool.
They're awesome.
I love them. Also, the fact that our mascot is a dinosaur. I mean, that might have been one of the reasons that I applied to UCalgary. I just saw that the mascot was a dinosaur. And at age 17, that's all the convincing I needed, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I understand that and appreciate that.
Okay, now moving on to a bit more of the why Canada and why Calgary pieces. So this is like one question I have, and this is a question I've had for a while. So like kind of not growing up in North America, to me, the States and Canada were very comparable. I didn't really know that there would be too many differences. Or if someone was from the States, I wouldn't have known fully what their motivation might be for coming to Canada. And then when we had our international counselor fly in, I asked one of the US counselors that, hey, why do you send your students here? And their answer was quite shocking to me that even with international tuition, UCalgary is still more affordable for a lot of US students than schools in their own home country. Now, that is a very big factor, but for like parents, counselors, or even students listening, what are some other things that they might want to know about coming to Canada, sending their students to be an sending their kids to be an international student in Canada?
Yeah, you are right.
The funding is certainly a piece. And I don't think it's shared at large. In the States, you'll have, in-state tuition. And then when you're out of state, you have out-of-state tuition. And overall, when you do the comparison, it is more affordable to come to Canada. And that's considering also, residence and, the dining hall and that kind of stuff. So yes, that is certainly a factor. And I think Calgary as a city, Calgary is a really big place to study for so many reasons. Calgary is Canada's fourth largest city, so it's well established with transit. There's always something fun going on. And the city itself has a lot to offer for students. I'm sure you can speak to that too, but there's a lot of places to study. And I feel like Calgary itself is, kind of like a small city within a big city. It's like the campus has its own niche area. We're known to be Canada's entrepreneurial university. And I think that is a reflection of the city being what it is. It's, there's a lot of businesses here, private businesses, and, that proximity to the university is really helpful for students. I only moved to Calgary about 2 years ago now, and I absolutely fell in love with the city. The proximity to the mountains is also really special. It's not something that you get everywhere in Canada. I should also say that recently we've earned our place as one of the top 5 research universities in Canada. So that's also very fun for students.
Also, a bit about housing and residence. So I think this is a concern that really anyone outside of like a 10-kilometer radius of the university might have, is that are there housing options near the university or inside the university? And I think I have quite a bit that I could add to this, but also like from more of a logistical perspective, what are some things that you might say about housing and residence?
Yeah, I think what's important for students to know is that UCalgary guarantees first-year residence for students who are funded directly from high school, as long as you apply before the May 1st deadline. So when we talk about, submitting your application early, there are other benefits to that other than receiving your offer earlier. Is also related to some of the deadlines that we have. So the May 1 is the deadline to apply for residence. But you can definitely speak more to the residence experience, I'm sure.
Oh, I loved being on residence. It was so enjoyable. And I think that really helped mitigate whatever the negative effects of the winter might have been in my first year. Because they're like the residence buildings are connected to the academic buildings through tunnels. So I like never had to step out essentially. So we have like plus 15s and tunnels connecting everything. But residence itself was such an enjoyable experience. I think just like I met some of my best friends there, and there's residence events that are like sometimes building specific, sometimes residence wide. All of that really facilitates you kind of having that quintessential university experience. But even outside of that, you do get a lot of external conveniences. For instance, the dining center is very like beneficial. Now that I'm like living off residence, I really have learned to value like what just going downstairs and getting a meal is like and how convenient that is. So many food options that also come with the dining center. Just in general, I would highly recommend it to anyone. Even when I like back when I used to volunteer and give out tours, I would still like recommend residence to people who were applying from Calgary. And a lot of people who are from Calgary have also stayed on residence. Like I have this one friend who lives close to Market Mall, which is like a 5 minute drive away, and he still lived on residence in his first year just to have that experience. And I think he has no regrets, neither do I. I think everyone who's lived on residence, from what I've heard, has had a great experience. So would highly recommend.
Totally. I think, this was a few years ago, but one of my biggest regrets was not staying to residence in my first year. I think it's a great way to meet people. I lived off campus alone, and it was definitely more work to find that network, right? Like it's certainly possible. There's so many things to do on campus. You just have to seek it out more. Whereas when you're in residence, you're kind of in that situation where it just happens organically.
Yeah, very much so. And also for students who might want to live outside of campus, there are a lot of housing options just like in around the university. I live like a 20-minute bike ride away and with like a bunch of other students as well. So if residence for any reason isn't something that you're considering, there's still a multitude of options that you can look into.
Totally. And I think that is kind of the format, is especially in first year, residence is kind of the norm. And then afterwards, students meet people that they're comfortable with, they move out. That is the typical process. So, yeah.
Yeah. I kind of want to move into more fun questions now.
Sure.
So you and I are both people who are not from Calgary. What are your top 3 favorite things about Calgary? And this is coming from you specifically. It doesn't have to be like objective facts about Calgary itself, but things you enjoy.
Yeah. I am a big fan of the Bow River. It's the river that flows through the city. Especially, we were just talking about winter. They clear the paths. It's great for running. It's great to just walk. I love having the Bow so close. And it flows. So like it's always dynamic. It always looks different at different times of the year. So highly recommend going to walk to the Bow if you have the chance. That's top for me. The other is the proximity to the mountains. So, we're about an hour to an hour and a half drive to the mountains. What do we say?
I mean, what I say is like just go up to TFDL and you can see the mountains from there.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that you can see the mountains from the city itself just shows how close.
Just from campus, like Arts Parkade rooftop, you can see the mountains.
Yes. And like, just looking at them, knowing how far they are, they're just so big when you're there in person. And every time I see them, I'm just still shocked about how stunning they are. So, there's some easier hikes, there's some more challenging hikes, but just going out there and seeing the Rocky Mountains is lovely. It's one of my top things around Calgary, I should say. I love the restaurants in Calgary. I think we have a really good variety. There's different areas that you can go to, and I'm still finding new restaurants as I go. But being so close to such good food, and even in the university district close to us, it's, you have some top picks there. But yeah, I'd say that's something I really love.
Yeah, I believe there was an article about how Calgary has like some of Canada's, I think they made a list of like top 100 restaurants in Canada, and Calgary had quite a few of them.
Yeah.
So if you're someone who's into food and into different cuisines, this is definitely a place.
Yeah.
I think my favorite thing about Calgary is kind of like the underground performance scene. So you have like a lot of like free comedy nights that happen in different places, or like a lot of other like student shows and like theaters, stuff like that. I think Calgary is still an emerging city, so that's not something a lot of people expect from it quite yet. But I think it has a really cool underground scene, whether it be music or like just like small movie screenings everywhere, comedy shows. That's the big one that like I enjoy going to a lot. So yeah, a lot of like very cool culture that happens here, and also Stampede. That's a very big thing.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's always something to do. When I do say I live in Calgary, Stampede is the first thing that comes up, and I actually went to the Stampede for the first time this year. So that was fun. It's just, so different than it's really unique, right? It's unique to Calgary, and the whole city is involved in it. So yeah,
I think we're nearing the end of this episode, and I wanted to ask you a wrap-up question. So, what is going to be your number one piece of advice that you'd like to give to US students applying, or generally any students who are applying?
Number one piece of advice is to apply early.
Okay, quoting Jolene over there.
I 100% will reiterate what Jareen said in the Admissions 101 podcast. If you haven't listened to that, I would definitely recommend listening to it. Please apply early. Seats do fill up. So the earlier you apply, the earlier we can review, we can check in for more documentation if required, and the earlier you'll be considered. So that to me is really the best piece of advice for the US student, but really anyone.
That also checks out, I think. The one takeaway always is apply early. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Michelle. It was lovely talking to you. I definitely had a lot of takeaways from this episode, and I'm sure our future students will have that as well.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure to be on the podcast and chat through some of the admission pieces. I always love talking about admission, just admissions in general, international admissions in general. For the next few months, the team will be really busy through working through evaluations, looking at all the different transcripts that we receive from all over the world. So we're excited to see more from the US.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Season 10 of the Choose UCalgary podcast. Remember to follow us on Instagram at choose.ucalgary and Facebook at UCalgaryFS to stay up to date on all things UCalgary for future students. DM if you have any questions, and stay tuned for the next episode. A huge shout out to Schulich Soundstage, a student-led music club right here on campus, for producing the amazing music you've heard throughout this episode. It's just one example of the incredible creativity and talent you'll find at UCalgary.